Okay. Howdy. I'm driving. Like alpha male. Yeah. My clunky old car. Gotta make money for those ladies, man. You know what I'm talking about. Speaking of ladies and speaking of money and speaking of kids, there's this guy named Patrick Henry. I read a book about him just, a month ago. I just do these videos to kind of refresh myself and talk about it and try to remember it the best I can when I talk about it. But this old Southern boy, Patrick Henry, was a big reason we have America today. The America we have today flooding with illegals and pushing woke crap. That's the reason why we have America today. Patrick Henry. He's not too happy with how America's going. I just know that. Well, Patrick Henry was from Virginia. He was friends with George Washington. They're basically the same age. And George Washington was, so I guess you could say this. George Washington was the sword of the revolution, the sword, like the physical fighting. Thomas Jefferson was the pen. He wrote the Declaration of Independence. And Patrick Henry was the trumpet. I mean, Patrick Henry had a loud, booming voice, very good speaker. The trumpet meaning like he blew the horn for the revolution, for freedom. And, of course, we got, John Adams was the workhorse, too, for the revolution. John Adams was a workhorse in the way that he went to all these delegations. He traveled to France, did a lot of work to get the colonists to that point. And then you had Benjamin Franklin, who was like the grandfather of the revolution. He was like the elder that everyone looked up to. Obviously the smartest and most wise of all the founding fathers. And they're all geniuses, all those guys. Patrick Henry was a great statesman. He was an orator. He was a lawyer and a patriot. He was an interesting guy. He kind of grew up in the backwoods of Virginia. Kind of rough and rumble guy. He liked to go hunting. He liked to be out in the woods, fishing, shooting at ducks, all that type of stuff. Real avid outdoorsman. A lot of those guys back then were. What else could you do when you were a kid? But he was kind of like rough around the edges by the time he got into his teen and college years. And eventually made his way into law school. He was a lawyer and became incredibly successful as a lawyer in Virginia. He married, I think he had like 17 kids. The guy was ridiculous. 17 kids. Back then that was normal. But it's just crazy how, like, in history class, you never know about this stuff. You're never taught anything. Patrick Henry, if it weren't for him, we wouldn't be here right now. As I said, he was a trumpet for the revolution. He never really fought in battles. He did a little bit during the Revolutionary War. And George Washington even says, like, this isn't really your place. Go back to being in politics, which is what he did. And for those of you who don't know, Patrick Henry was basically let me just get that. He was basically the guy who provided provisions and soldiers and food and troops for George Washington. So, for those who know about like U.S. history, the colonists weren't really well trained, well fed, well supplied. There was a lot of issues, a lot of deferments, a lot of guys leaving the Continental Army, just like taking off because they felt like they weren't getting enough money or they hated it, or they, just like it wasn't like a trained army like the British had, the Redcoats. So Washington had a lot of problems with guys. There was potential mutinies, guys would get mad, After the Revolutionary War, of course, during George Washington's presidency, a lot of the veterans of the Revolutionary War wanted to overthrow George Washington because he wasn't paying them what they said what they thought they were going to get paid for their service. So they had trouble with that for a long time. And Patrick Henry keep it together as best he could. Washington would send him dispatches like, hey, we're out here, we have this many guys, we don't have munitions, we don't have food. And Patrick Henry worked tirelessly, literally some days he worked 24/7, making sure that bread or rum or whiskey or meat was sent to certain places so they could feed the troops, or they would bring fresh uniforms and clothes, cotton cloths, that type of thing. They would ship that. They would ship, even soldiers to where they are needed. So he was very important. And it's ridiculous that in our propagandized, horse crap public schools we didn't learn this. It's a shame. But to learn about things later in life, that's the only way you learn is by doing it yourself. Don't trust public school. It's all propaganda. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. They just say, basically, this is public school in a nutshell. White people are bad. You did slavery. You did the Holocaust. You started all the wars. You treat everyone like crap. You're evil. You're white. Feel guilty if you're a white kid. That's what I was told. It's such a joke. It's bullshit. Anyways, don't listen to public school. They're all lies. The books are fake. But Patrick Henry, came back to him in the autobiography I read, he basically provided munitions for their army. And when Washington was at his lowest point, which were many, many points, I don't remember all the points exactly. There's a lot of battles, a lot of wars. Patrick Henry would come out of the woodworks and just deliver for him. And even when he was sick, Patrick Henry, he had a lot of illnesses, like gastrointestinal stuff, and he had to deal with that along with working 24 hours trying to keep everything going smoothly against the most powerful army in the world, which is impressive. So I really respect the guy. But him and Washington, and of course Jefferson and all the ones doing the legislation, those guys kept it together in one of the most crucial times of our country, and we need another one of those types of people now today, let's just be honest. But it's crazy to hear about how two men, him and Washington, kind of kept everything together and giving us the country we have today. Now, after he left after the Revolutionary War was over, he was really big in politics. He was big in Virginia politics, big time lawyer. He was against the Constitution. The father of the Constitution was James Madison. And there's a lot of things he didn't like about the Constitution. He thought it gave the federal power, the federal government, which is the overall government, more power over the states. He was more into states' rights. He wanted the states to have the power. He didn't want the federal government to just, the federal government now just tramples over us. And he forebode that. He's like, if you give the federal government all this power, the states are going to be trampled on. And that's what's happening. It's crazy. All the stuff he talked about, he worried about the Constitution with. He's like, there's loopholes here, there's loopholes there. They're doing it right now. He was really smart, and so was Madison. Madison wrote a great document. It's the best one ever written. But there's always going to be stuff. There's always going to be loopholes for evil people to basically get their way. And that's exactly what happened. Patrick Henry, he did have slaves. He wasn't really for slavery, but I know it sounds bad, but he thought it was up to the states to decide. He didn't like a big bureaucratic government like our government now saying, okay, let's go to war with this. Let's just give Israel $3 billion more. He knew that was corrupt, and it is. I'm in Illinois. What if us people from Illinois, and I know that's probably not going to happen, say, no, we don't want to give Israel money or Ukraine? That should be all right. But the federal government just does it for us because they're so big and corrupt and powerful. And that's what his worry was. So he clashed a lot with Jefferson and Madison, all the other guys who he was like a part of the Virginia nobility and nobility. Sorry, James. What's his name? Sorry, I just work, so I'm a little bit tired. But George Mason was another one who he would clash with at times. William Randolph, a lot of very important people at that time, very intelligent, were debating on whether or not the Constitution was good. And of course, I don't think it could have done much better, but Patrick Henry was against it in a lot of ways, and that put him at odds with Jefferson and Madison and even like Hamilton at times, because those three were really big into legislation. But I just found it interesting how he was talking about states' rights and the federal government having the power to take over, and he was like saying this could happen, and it completely happened. He's right. Madison and Jefferson were just doing the best they could for that time. They had no clue what was going to transpire 200 years later, 300 years later, but it did. And they're all right in a way. I mean, someone like Patrick Henry or Jefferson or Madison, I mean, they're like probably 10 times smarter than any of the dumbasses we have in Congress. Just complete morons, complete prostitutes. These people were lawyers. They were well read. They could speak Latin. They could speak other languages. They were just so great with writing and articulate in their vernacular. You know, Chuck Schumer and Lindsey Graham are worried if Israel's gonna kiss their ass tomorrow. They don't write anything. They're just money grubbing prostitutes for the government. And that's why I read about history and these people, because they cared. Yeah, slavery happened. It was an institution. You can't just end it right there. But these people had a vision and a great idea. And they made this country what it is because of what they did, because of their views, because of their education, because of their genius. The only genius Lindsey Graham has is, wearing pink underwear. There's nothing from that guy. We have to respect and really, truly be grateful for the people that came ahead of us. If we're not, well, then go live in Nigeria or something. See what their constitution's like. But anyways, that's Patrick Henry. That's the most I remember from him. Big fan. He had a big family. He was a family man. Obviously well-educated. American hero, American patriot. Without him, America wouldn't be here today. So that's that. Go check out an autobiography on him and you won't be disappointed.